worse every night. 3 more days, then I can kiss this town goodbye.
What's up guys, True Warrior here, and today I want to revisit an old debate I've been floating around on YouTube and other social media platforms. Judging by the video thumbnail, I think you already know what I'm talking about. It is Resident Evil 3 Remake. And by the time this video is up, the game will officially reach its 5th year anniversary. The game whose predecessor introduced us to the iconic BOW Nemesis and brought back one of the franchise's most beloved characters, Jill Valentine. However, despite the hype surrounding the remake due to the success of Resident Evil 2 Remake, unfortunately 3 fell short of living up to the original. So much so that the game received criticism like, it was too short, they cut too much content, or my favorite one, what a terrible game. And while I agree the remake left a lot to be desired, there's one opinion that really stood out to me. Is Resident Evil 3 Remake truly a bad game? Because in my opinion, there are things this remake actually does well, or even better than the original. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We'll be analyzing what each version does better than the other. Story, characters, gameplay, and more. Now before we begin, and because I forgot to mention this in my previous video, and some of the reactions to that one made it necessary, I wanted to say the following. These are my personal opinions. We can agree or disagree respectfully to the point of having constructive discussion on both sides. But please, if you intend to insult others, better to keep your comments to yourself before things get out of hand. With that being said, let's begin by talking about what Capcom did differently this time around. The story begins with the game's prologue, where we witness the outbreak in Raccoon City. Instead of showing zombies taking over the city outright, this outbreak feels more like the anarchy seen in Gotham City in the Joker movie. What really stands out in this prologue is how we're introduced to Jill Valentine. The remake takes the time to explore her trauma after the events at the Spencer Mansion. Small details like the pills on her nightstand, recurring nightmares, and even subtle hints that she may have considered suicide add a layer of depth that wasn't present in the original game. This more human approach makes Jill feel more real and grounded. Also, unlike the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis where Jill is thrown by an explosion right at the start, the remake lets us take a look at her apartment. Here we get insights into her personality, such as her affection for animals, her investigation into her umbrella after being suspended, and the excessive beer and soda in her fridge. Man, I wish I could drink that much and not gain weight. All of this is cut short when Nemesis bursts into Jill's apartment, pretty much hellbent on killing her. Jill escapes and runs into her partner, Brad Vickers. In this version, Brad plays a more emotional role, which, after being infected, he sacrifices himself so Jill can get away from the zombie horde. But here's where I get mixed feelings about this. On one hand, we lose the iconic scene from the original where Nemesis brutally kills Brad with its own hands, or more like with its own tentacle. This narrative change weakens Nemesis' purpose in my opinion because it was built to eliminate STAR's members, yet here, even a regular zombie can do its job. Mechanically, this prologue introduces the dodge mechanic, which is very faithful to the original and slightly easier to execute this time from my point of view. After leaving Brad behind, Jill runs into Dario Rosso, who has far less relevance and dialogue compared to the original. After escaping Nemesis and seeing how it won't pay for the damage to her apartment, Jill is rescued by Carlos Oliveira, a UBCS member who temporarily incapacitates the pursuers so they can flee. Carlos brings her to his squad where we meet other UBCS members, such as Tyrell Patrick, who has a more significant role than the original, Nikolai Gunobiev, who is even more despicable in this remake, and finally the squad leader Mikhail Victor, who recruits Jill to help repair the subway and evacuate civilians. This is where we hit the first explorable segment of the game, downtown Raccoon City. As we explore the city, we revisit iconic locations from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, like the restaurant where you can hear the end credits music from Resident Evil 2. And the train substation where Jill must restore power to the subway. However, the downtown area feels more restricted compared to the original game. There are locations like the gas station that are on the map but not explorable, the city hall that only gets a cameo, and the Raccoon City Press which doesn't even show up. It's a shame really, because one of the things I loved about the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the feeling of navigating a larger non-linear map. In the original, you had to explore several areas and gather items to fix the train. In the remake, you just put out a fire and head out to the subway station, cutting out about 30 minutes of gameplay. After restoring the subway power, Jill tries to draw Nemesis away, leading to the iconic moment where she shouts,
"Come on, you creepy ass stalker! You want stars? I'll give you stars!"
The only downside is, if Nemesis hits you mid-dialogue, the line gets interrupted.
"Come on, you creepy ass..."
I don't mind that they changed when she says this line, but at least they could have let her not get interrupted by Nemesis. During the chase, Jill escapes through a ventilation shaft and enters the next area, the sewers. Both versions of the game feature a sewer section where you explore and avoid dangerous enemies while trying to escape. In the remake, those enemies are the Hunter Gamma, creatures that haunt my memories from when I tried to speedrun this game. Compared to the original, the sewer section here is more fleshed out, which is something I heavily appreciate. After exiting the sewers, Nemesis is waiting for Jill, and the chase continues until she reaches the top of the burning building. That's where we get our first true boss fight, Nemesis now wielding a flamethrower. It's an intense battle and the music really amplifies the tension. I love these close quarter fights where it's just you versus the enemy, and the addition of a flamethrower makes it more dynamic. The only downside is that once you learn how to speedrun it, the fight becomes laughably easy, which can be over in like 20 seconds.
All right, let's do this.
Still kicking?
After the fight, Jill finds her way to Kendo's gun shop and meets the man himself, Robert Kendo. I was surprised to see him since he wasn't in the original, but at the end of the day, I'm glad they added him. It deepens his character and not only shows his friendship with Jill, but also his humanity as he cares for his infected daughter.
It's alright, Pumpkin. It's alright. That's a good girl.
Later, Nemesis returns, now equipped with a rocket launcher. Carlos saves Jill again and they make it back to the subway station. This is where Nikolai reveals his true colors, abandoning both Mikhail and Jill. Mikhail sacrifices himself to take out Nemesis and derails the train. I actually like this version better than the original since it gives Nikolai a more sinister edge and Mikhail a more heroic exit with better dialogue.
Get off my train, shit bird!
Meanwhile, we switch perspectives and take control of Carlos, who heads to the Raccoon City Police Department with Tyrell to find Dr. Nathaniel Bard, the man with the cure for the T-virus. This section is a great addition to the remake, and although we don't control Jill like in the original, the remake version of the RPD section gives us more time to not only know Carlos better, but it also ties with Resident Evil 2 Remake, including how Marvin got infected, which is courtesy of Brad. Carlos plays a bit differently from Jill, which his dodge is more like a parry where he punches enemies, and it feels great when you pull it off successfully, feeling like a total badass. With that being said, I once again have mixed feelings with Brad, which, while it's interesting to see him infect Marvin, I think it was a missed opportunity not to have Nemesis take him out. It would have better reinforced Nemesis' purpose. After Carlos and Tyrell investigate the RPD and the train derailment, We return to Jill, who, despite being injured, attempts to escape. From a distance, she sees Nemesis on fire diving into the water. And that's where Jill drops one of the best new lines in the game.
Bitch can't even swim.
After roasting Nemesis literally and verbally, he emerges in a new four-legged form, and Jill must face his latest mutation. The fight is pretty entertaining, especially the way you use the grenade launcher mines to knock him down. The clock tower backdrop is visually stunning. The only downside is that after the fight, Nemesis infects Jill with the T-virus, rendering her unconscious. And half a day later, Carlos finds her and brings her to the hospital where she rests while he searches for the cure. That's right, Clock Tower is not playable in the remake. Unbelievable. Removing the Clock Tower not only cuts another 30 minutes of gameplay, but also erases some enemy variety like the giant spiders. Now playing as Carlos again, we explore the hospital in search of the vaccine. Here we encounter classic enemies such as the Hunters, who look just as threatening as they did in the earlier versions and are extra fun to take down, especially when Carlos punches them in the face. After finding Bart dead and injecting Jill with the vaccine, Carlos must hold off a zombie horde while Tyrell works on locking down the hospital. This part reminded me a lot of Resident Evil 4, which, during the cabin fight with Leon and Luis protecting Ashley from the Ganados. It also highlights Carlos' character, which is risking everything to protect both Tyrell and Jill, holding back dozens of enemies on his own. Who needs backup when Carlos is the backup? After successfully defending the hospital, news breaks on TV that the government plans to nuke Raccoon City in a matter of hours. Tyrell attempts to contact the government to stop the missile, while Carlos heads to the underground lab to secure a vaccine sample. Once Jill wakes up, she heads to the game's final location to assist him, the Nest Lab. And yes, once again we get cut content. There's no park, no cemetery, which means the Gravedigger boss is gone, and the Dead Factory has been replaced by this new Nest variant. During the first segment of Nest, we see Nikolai observing Jill coldly from a control room. When she tries to reach him by an elevator, it loses power and Jill must collect 3 fuses to restore it. During this segment, we're introduced to a new enemy type called the Paleheads, which are faster and stronger than regular zombies and hard to kill unless you use a magnum or acid grenades to stop their regeneration. Once the elevator is fixed, it's revealed that Genovia has been collecting data on both UBCS members and Jill for an unknown client. Soon after, Tyrell arrives to inform Jill that if they can deliver the vaccine in time, the missile strike might be called off. With only hours remaining on the clock, Jill and Tyrell descend deeper into Nest, but Nemesis ambushes them, killing Tyrell in the process while Jill narrowly escapes, leaving the bioweapon behind. At least Tyrell had more screen time here than the single scene he got in the original. Just like the Dead Factory in the original game, the main objective in this is to mix several chemicals to create a vaccine. One thing I liked here was the scattered files detailing the creation of various creatures, including Nemesis itself. There's also a lab filled with hunter incubators, which, during my first time playing this game, I knew they bust off, and surely enough, they did after collecting the last ingredient. The chemical mixing puzzle even reminded me of the water puzzle from the original RE3, just on a smaller scale. After obtaining the vaccine, Nemesis ambushes Jill once again, but thanks to her quick wit, she manages to flee to the waste disposal chamber, where she temporarily incapacitates it. But before she can escape, Nikolai steals the vaccine and kicks her down where Nemesis awaits her. The fight that follows is basically a recycled version of the earlier battle near the clock tower. Only this time, depending on the difficulty, enemies like zombies and paleheads spawn to make things harder. You can shoot at tanks Nemesis hides behind, and once it takes enough damage, Carlos shows up to assist Jill and finishes his Nemesis with a bath of acid. After giving Nemesis a nice dose of industrial acid, Jill finally confronts Nikolai once again. The tension between them peaks as they point their guns at each other, ready to end it once and for all. But before either can pull the trigger, what's left of Nemesis reemerges, this time as a grotesque, monstrous blob of writhing flesh. Just when you think things can't get any worse, Nikolai uses the chaos as cover to slip away again. Carlo chases after him to stop him from escaping with the only remaining vaccine, leaving Jill to face Nemesis in its final metamorphosis. And this is where the real challenge begins. Depending on the difficulty level, this boss fight can either be a walk in the park or an absolute nightmare. And since I enjoy suffering, let's talk about how this fight goes on Inferno mode. This fight sucks. The first time I played this fight on Inferno, I finally understood why they named the mode that way. Nemesis has a devastating move where he unleashes a series of rapid attacks. If you fail to dodge even once, you're done. No second chances, no recovery. One mistake means instant death. This battle becomes a test of reflexes, precision, and most of all, mental endurance. Every mistake is costly, and the only way to survive is to memorize every attack pattern and master the dodge mechanic perfectly. What's interesting is that during the fight, you can actually see Jill's exhaustion. Her body language, her tone, everything screams that she's had enough.
Go ahead! I'm gonna put you right back on your ass. You think I don't know how to fuck you up? I am sick of your shit!
It's a subtle detail, but it adds more emotional weight to her journey and to the finale. The first time I beat this boss on Inferno mode, it took me about 2 to 3 hours to beat it. My patience was wearing as thin as Jill's. It honestly pushed me to the limit. To finish off the beast, Jill has to destroy several massive growing tumors. Once those are down, she activates 3 power cells scattered around the area to access a massive weapon known as Finger. A piece of experimental artillery that she uses in glorious fashion to obliterate Nemesis once and for all, right through his monstrous skull. With the nightmare finally over, Jill exits the lab and heads to the rooftop of the complex, where one final obstacle remains: Nikolai Ganoviev. True to his role as the treacherous villain, Nikolai destroys the vaccine right in front of Jill and even tries to kill her. But just in time, Carlos returns and tackles Nikolai, giving Jill the opening to end things once and for all. At this point, the game waits you aim and pull the trigger. While the correct choice might be to shoot him in the chest, I personally went for a shot at the groin. After everything he did, I figured he deserved a little karma. With Nikolai neutralized, Jill and Carlos escaped using the helicopter Nikolai intended to flee in. From the air, they watch as Raccoon City is wiped off the map, destroyed by a nuclear missile that erases all traces of the T-virus outbreak. But despite the magnitude of the tragedy, there's still one man suspiciously absent from the entire story: Barry Burton. One of the areas where Resident Evil 3 Remake really shines is in the reworking of its characters, both in terms of visual design and character development. If there's one character who truly benefited from the remake, it's Carlos Oliveira. Not only did he get a modern makeover, but his personality was expanded and refined. His charismatic attitude, his chemistry with Jill, and his overall growth throughout the story make him far more memorable. And of course, he gave us one of the most iconic lines in the remake.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
This line perfectly captures his charm and adds a touch of humor and humanity in the middle of the chaos. As for Jill's, her reimagining remains true to the core of her character. While some iconic lines like the Stars one were altered, her bravery, intelligence, and determination are still unmistakable. And yes, her iconic blue outfit is still in the game, proving that Capcom respected her legacy despite some tweaks. Nicole Tompkins delivered an astounding performance, giving Jill a tone that's both strong and emotionally grounded. In fact, she returned to voice Jill again in the animated film Resident Evil Death Island. Speaking of Death Island, I'm pretty sure they took inspiration from Jill's final blow to Nemesis when crafting her final shot against Dylan Blake in the movie. And lastly, I have to say, Jill's durability in this game must be off the charts, since the number of times she's been knocked out and walks it off? Unreal. If there's one character who feels nerfed in this remake, it's Nemesis. In the original RE3, it was a relentless force. You were chased constantly, and worst of all, Nemesis would wait for you right outside save rooms, ready to resume the hunt the second you stepped out. That kind of pressure made every encounter feel like a game of cat and mouse. In the remake though, not so much. Its presence is much more limited, with most of its appearance being scripted rather than dynamic. Meanwhile, a Nemesis in the RE3 remake only appears for set moments. There was even an early version of the game where a Nemesis could enter a save room, specifically the Burning Alley, but apparently Capcom patched it out, removing one of the few moments where it made Nemesis unpredictable. Damn it, Capcom, you really did us dirty. One of the biggest issues with RE3 Remake is its lack of replayability, especially when compared to the original. In RE3 Nemesis, there was the life selection mechanic where players had to make decisions at certain key moments. These choices would impact the flow of the story, resulting in different routes, scenes, and dialogue, strongly encouraging multiple playthroughs. In the remake, however, replayability is mostly tied to difficulty settings. The final boss fight is the most major element that changes significantly between difficulties. Another cut feature was the Mercenaries mode, a classic staple of the franchise, which, in its place, Capcom introduced Resident Evil Resistance, an asymmetrical multiplayer mode that, while it had potential, it was abandoned within a few months. I genuinely believe that the remake would have benefited from a DLC expansion, something like what Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil 4 Remake received, but sadly that never happened. Overall, Resident Evil 3 Remake is an entertaining game with stunning visuals and a well-polished combat system. It even manages to preserve over 50% of the content from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and improves in some aspects. In my opinion, the remake's biggest mistake was its content, particularly the reduced map size. You lose most of downtown Raccoon City, the time Nemesis chases you in its base form is shortened, and its threat level overall feels diminished. As a remake, it fails in key areas, but as a game overall, I think it's still pretty solid and has its unique charm. It shines in some areas and stumbles in others. And despite the overwhelmingly negative reception at launch, I think Resident Evil 3 Remake has aged better than expected. Many players now accepted it for what it is. But what do you think about Resident Evil 3 Remake? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and with that, this is True Warrior signing off saying, GG well played.